Hello, everybody. This is Noe with Walk with Yah Ministry, asking the question today, has the renewed covenant even started? And I know that sounds very ludicrous to some. It's like, Noe, why would you even ask that? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Well, humor me if you will, please. But let's get started. And I'm going to start with Jeremiah 31, verse 31, where the Bible says, "See, the days are coming, declares Yah, when I shall make a renewed covenant with the house of Yisra'ěl and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I strengthened their hand to bring them out of the land of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yah. For this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Yisra'ěl after those days, declares Yah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, they shall be my people, and no longer shall they teach each one his neighbor, and each one his brother, saying, Know Yahweh. For they shall all know me, and the least of them, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yah. For I shall forgive their crookedness and remember their sin no more." Now, in kind of reading this right now, if you notice in verse 31, it talks about the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And then in verse 33, it just mentions the house of Israel. So it's kind of like there's some reconciliation that needs to happen there first, because it says after those days. Just something to think about. So here's another question, or another point. Do we still teach one another and our neighbors about God's requirements? I believe we do. I'm still learning from other people. They're still learning from me. So then that makes one wonder if the renewed covenant, the new covenant, has even started. Or have we selectively understood this passage, ignoring the part that we really haven't cared to acknowledge? I think most people are familiar with this verse, starting in Genesis 4, verse 3. In the course of time, Cain brought to Yah an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. And Yah had regard for Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry and his face fell. And Yah said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door, and his desire is for you. You must rule over him." Why did Yah look on Abel's offerings over Cain's? How did Cain know what was defined as good? How did he know what sin was? How did he know that murder was bad? How could Cain be held accountable for murder if it wasn't defined? I believe that God, started teaching parts of the Torah from the very beginning, even from the Garden of Eden. Although not formally written down and, fully expressed until Exodus, with more clarifications given in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And I also see where the Jewish people rebelled to where they got humbled by foreigners to the point of getting expelled from their own land, to where they didn't even know how to do the Torah. And the Torah had to be reintroduced again. Even Deuteronomy, if you translate that, it means repetition, or in other words, the second giving of the Torah. Now, this was needed because those that were in the rebellious, or in the wilderness, were rebellious and stiff-necked, and most of them died off. So they had to teach all the younger ones again to make sure they got it down. We also see this theme in the book of Judges, with everybody doing what was right in their own eyes. Going further, we see another example in 2 Kings 22 with King Josiah rebuilding the temple after all the north and the south, the family fighting and division and chaos and killings and all that type of stuff. And then Hilkiah, the high priest, finds a copy of the Torah. And at that point, they have to reinstate the Torah again. And then comes Jeremiah, which gave the words that we read in the beginning in Jeremiah chapter 31. So that's why I say renewed instead of new. Because the commandments, the Torah, the mitzvot, all that stuff, the hukim, the statutes, everything had to be started from the beginning, kind of had to be renewed again. We had to recommit ourselves. The people did, we do. But let me go further. Even Jude has this to say. Beloved ones, in Jude 1, verse 3, beloved ones, making all haste to write to you concerning our common deliverance, I felt the necessity to write to you, urging you to earnestly contend for the belief which was once delivered to the set-apart ones. So again, he's saying, go back. Go way back to the beginning to contend for that faith. So we also have to go back to the foundations of the faith, because there's many people that seem to discard that for whatever reason. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to bring this up, and rightfully you should. And that's going to be Hebrews 8 verses 12, starting there, where the Bible says, because I shall forgive their unrighteousness and their sins and their lawlessnesses, I shall no longer remember. By saying renewed, he's talking about, I'll get that in a moment. By saying renewed, he has made the first old. Now, what becomes old and growing aged is near disappearing. Now, many people will say, well, you see there, Noe, he's saying the law. It's, it's old, it's disappearing, it's gone, we don't need it. Well, I hear you, but just think about this. Here's something to consider. That the context of that conversation actually starts in Hebrews 7, as the writer of Hebrews is talking about the priesthood that is changing, not the Torah itself, not the requirements. So I'm not going to get into all that. That's a much bigger conversation, and that's not really what I'm focusing on here. What I'm really asking is, have we even entered into the renewed, or the new covenant, however you want to say it? There was a time when Yah, God, was slowly training his people before bringing them into a new place, a new age, a new era, if you will. Now, I want to tell you straight up, I'm not a theologian. I'm not an expert in linguistics, and I'm not necessarily betting the farm on this one. And I have no problem with being wrong. I'm okay with that. I realize I'm pretty human. But I do ponder on a lot of things a lot of times, which isn't to say I'm right. I will say it's been a busy week, And so I thought this time around I would pose the question to you, for you to give me your thoughts. But do you see what I'm seeing here? Could it be that we haven't even started the renewed covenant yet? Because Jeremiah 31 verse 34 says to know him. Now I believe the Hebrew there means to have an intimate relationship with, and not just a superficial knowledge of him. I mean, am I wrong? And I don't see that happening until a time in the future, millennial reign. Could it be that we're still in a spiritual Exodus 2.0, where one greater than Moses, as prophesied in Deuteronomy 18 verse 18, is leading us to a promised land where all of our enemies have been subdued, since the original Jews never completed that task? That's a long question, but still, it's a question nonetheless. But let me know of your thoughts. I'd be interested to hear. So, what do you think? Maybe there are some, theologians and people smarter than me out there. Good. In any case, I pray that this helps you. Just want to give you something to ponder on. This is Noe with Walk with Yah Ministry. You can email me at noe@walkwithyah.com. And just know, maybe your miracle could be next.